visiting here from Ceremony Monastery, which is where Geshe studied and his teacher studied. And welcome to Virginia, and thank you for coming to translate for us. Everybody has a copy of the text, right? Okay. So we're going to go through it, and we're going to start with the opening prayers. Usually, it's typically the Mondo offering and the Refuge and aspiration prayer. And actually, the 37 verses is largely about the Refuge and aspiration. So keep that in mind. Everybody have a copy? No?
So first of all, to all of you gathered here, Geshe would like to say Tashi and good evening. So now he's had a few opportunities to meet with all of you, and it's really been a great pleasure for him. He's really delighted that he's been able to meet you all. So tonight Geshe will be teaching on the 37 Bodhisattva practices by Vyasa Togme. And these are really these are great teachings for the actual practice, or to work on actually putting into practice, specifically as beginners.
Holiness.
Oh, that's okay. So Geshe himself has had the fortune to receive these teachings on the 37 Bodhisattva practices 4 times directly from His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
이나야다 태마슈도 슈뉴 이나야다 심기톤에 시다 기월 도토면도 쓰네.
But even though he's been able to receive these teachings and contemplate them, he says he still has not been able to really integrate them into his mind.
도토면도 이나야다 소소면에 멜론 감독치도 얘기 있었네.
However, he prays and does the best that he can.
근데 선산에 결혼도 나다가 저 많이 봐 결혼성을 뒤진더니 결혼서 직 준주율에 전주기 쓴지 냠래라베 배전한텐데 요래 근데 선산 결혼도라다 디레 하고 여기다 멜론이었으네.
So Geshe says this, all of you maybe are not like him and are very diligent in your practice and really make a great effort in generating bodhicitta. He has the aspiration prayer that you all will really be able to actualize these practices.
그래서 난도 나서 지단이 택보침보다 택보 멤버 라인이 가리톤이 개발치고 그러세나 아니 잔주기 있음 게마지 보내 개발치고 그랬으니.
So what is the difference between the great vehicle and the lesser vehicle, or the Hinayana and Mahayana? The difference is bodhicitta.
근데 선상 땅에서 택보침비 최진의 인상 잔주기 쌤디 다 귤라 마케바나 다 마케바이나 다 잔주 쌤발랑이 명지 더베 사마르로.
So as it is said, as that is said, then as practitioners of the Dharma of the great vehicle or Mahayana Dharma, for those who don't give rise to bodhicitta in their mind streams, such individuals cannot be called bodhisattvas.
근데 선상 단다다 라레 소디만 나라 수행이 소봉아서 레탐보라 냐월 코와 인상 다 딩어서 냠레 체나에 제모트베 매바 이바레스니로. 나서 단다 라레 소디만 나라다 장주승지 냠레 체단디 송베디 나다나도다 레탐보이 체나 체투베디 라레 소보디 인사레스니.
So as that is the case, as beginners on the path, there is particular importance to practicing these according to these 37 bodhisattva practices as a means to generate bodhicitta. There is nothing that is more powerful or beneficial than that, especially as beginners on the path.
라르스데마 파 데셰 갸와이나 지단이 니마 숨시 망보 코라 가수 띵사버트에나 조여레 계속다 직발이나 다테니 뒤세 매바체 아니 캐랑서 뒤세 뜬거 봐 합다시라 택마지 모두 공선 매바인자 뒤세 뜬이 뜬거 봐이나 테리 나랑이다 데네마 코란 식시자치네 데셰 갸기 라와 안 디젤라 코란 내가 사카인 바데 나라티 게볼라이게 멜럼 가서 삼로였으니.
So really, it would be ideal. Excuse me. It would be ideal, Geshe says, if he could go into great detail regarding these 37 bodhisattva practices. As far as giving a really thorough explanation of this text. But that, in order to really go deeply into the teachings, it would take maybe 3 or 4 days. So since we don't have very much time, then Geshe says he will just give a sort of abbreviated teaching, going through the 37 points and touching upon the parts that he finds particularly important and beneficial to give a deeper explanation for.
장집지 좁아 좁이 줄 때마다 인보 서로 막 된다 독도 써봐야나 다 된다 인보디 디 인사레스로 된다 인보
간데라
단다 장집지 다 장집이 생계라로 장집이 생계라 다 장집이 다 락렌지 따고로 락렌디 지에라 다 된다 인보 가서 미라 닝 매봐야나 가서 데모토 봐라 되나시다 밀라 닝 매나 말이 디 고디 드시기. 구추 고니나 도. 구추고 고니. 고니. 고골라도 장죽
장축 주소.
주술 닝보 주와 야생 라운 섭디 마스면데 가서나 장죽이 좁아데 닝보 뒤바 임바이면나 아니 다 닝보 가서 미지 닝나시 쏘고디다 라는 섭디마데 사레스네로.
So then the title actually says, so in it's a little bit different from the English title here, but it says the essence, the heart essence of the Bodhisattva practices rolled into one, kind of drilwa means like condensed. And so what is Ningpo means heart, literally. So these 37 Bodhisattva practices are like the heart essence. They're like the very heart of the Bodhisattva's practice.
다 라는 섭디마 수행이 37 수행이 가르세나 다 디나는 당당하소 쇼로가 숨주 섭디 쏘고다 잠주 숨비 냠내데 두바 임바이나 쇼로가 숨주 섭디나 두바 인상 콜라 숨주 섭디마 다바레 했으니로.
And so since there are 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, or 37 Bodhisattva practices that are really the heart essence of the practice, then there are 37 verses which explain each of these practices.
다 숨주 섭디인데 맞아 쇼로가 레레 시고레잖아. 쇼로가 숨주 섭디 요바 인상 숨주 섭디 마송마레 디 장가 제디에 가서 고네 쇼로가 지 니디 파피 타마타마네 쇼로가 시 파피 고레스. 타마라 시여와 타마 쇼로가 시 강네 쇼로가 니 파피니 디탐 바르기 숨주 섭디에 달라는 섭디만 뭐마디레스.
Actually, so there are the two introductory verses, and then there are the 4 concluding verses, and then in between these there are the 37 verses which explain each of the 37 Bodhisattva practices.
디 이지미지 녀바치 아니 캐란도 되긴도네 다 단단히 라바좀 많이 말아와 니 캐란도 되긴도네 다 이지토네에 되게싱에도 되기토네 맞으니 되기도네 맞었다 냠렐라 자르투고도면도 따야디 개청무시고 되셨으네.
So the important thing is to reflect upon each of these verses and think whether they really actually we embody them or not. That's the important thing, is to really actually take the instruction to heart and put them into practice.
대인자다 당공해서 다 나몰 로케셔라 여수에데 나몰라에데 차서와 제 로케셔로 수에데 파바지 대원절라 차서와 했으니 파바지 대원절라 차서와 가르스나 갑디면서 장주스메 땅 냠레 셰고바 인상 장주스메 냠레데 딱 파바치레스데 잠인지게 하레 송바데 텔라테네다 제네셀라 딱 소고 차서와 했으니.
So it starts by saying to the protector Avalokiteshvara and the Supreme Guru, I continually pay homage with my 3 gates, or the 3 doors. And so here homage is paid to Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, who really is the essence of bodhicitta, who is the deity who embodies the nature of compassion in bodhicitta, and so that's why particularly homage is paid here to him. So it says, although he sees that all phenomena are free from coming and going, he strives only for the benefit of beings.
yes. 당어도 쇼로가 당에 쇼로가를 증대 개되어봐이나 뒤주 고사래 이 쇼로가를 된다시 디젤라 캐시모도도 아니게 지그레를 딜리슈기 있으니.
So Geshe says that he's not going to explain, in great detail or word for word each verse. He's just going to give kind of an overall explanation for each verse, so it doesn't take up too much time. And then, if he feels that there's importance to go into, that it's important to go into detail, like regarding a particular word or phrase or something, then he'll elaborate as he feels is necessary.
근데서는 당마도 쇼로가 당보디 당보 고수기 쇼로가 당보디 가르스나 또 처벌져 버려 했으니 처벌져 봐. 배자 간다간 좀바이나 당보 차세고 그랬으니로 차세에 소속이다 차세에 된다디 가르스나 내가 받지 시와라와 대저 좀 말아 받지 먹어야자 내가 받지 시와다 털도다 아니 소속이다 zubesangi 고만 토베 된다라다 차세와 임바레스니.
So the first verse is following the custom of the author, which is starting off with a verse of homage or prostration, or like making offering and prostration. And so the point of this is to dispel any sort of temporary obstacles, to pacify any obstacles or hindrances that may arise. And then ultimately it is to pay homage for the purpose of reaching this state of ultimate liberation and enlightenment.
근데 다 담보대 가르친 거잖아. 간지 죽은 조언 미세냐 조여다가 저도 선제가 라마쇼다 제네스고라 따도 고슨 그베 차서로 선에디 간세나 간지 죽은 조언 미세냐 간지 선에디 파바시르세 간지다 최탐제 아니 조화도 와라서가 덴버 주게 조화도 와 맨나양 이나 코란게 조화고 시기를 했어요. 간지 죽은 조언 미세냐 다 조여다가 덴버도 조여던도 조화선데 탐제라 뒤긴도다 인제 뒤쪽도 다 여와메바로 아니 가투이나 닝제와나 캠비에 되는 데변데 온지 시기바에 됐어요. 여와메바 예링메바 콜라 야가치 콜라 두가치 딘데메바 예링메바 시기바에 됐어요. 조여된 초그레메바 조여된다 찍도 쓴데바 다디 칭이디 수레스는 파바체르세 됐어요. 조여된다 찍도 라마 초다 체르스고라 라마다 체르스니보디 모보 에르메바 삼삼라 딘드에 원래 간사나 소소 라마이 모르게 딘데 끼네 공고가 요래 아니 삼삼라 단답값도 라마다 체르스니보디 추도 오마 제바나 삼로땅 텔라 차색이 있으니 고론 디치오레스 차사단데라야 안 류지차 나기차 이기차 수비베는 룽아 유숨지차 대야 쇼웨체 원담이바 원다체 쇼웨 멤버 뒤딱도 딱도 고숨급이 차서로 니숨고였어요.
So this first verse again says, although he sees that all phenomena are free of coming and going, he strives only for the benefit of beings. To the protector, Avalokiteshvara, and the Supreme Guru, I continually pay homage with my three gates. So this line here that says, although he sees that all phenomena are free from coming and going, so this is referring to the fact that even though Avalokiteshvara sees that all phenomena is empty of any inherent existence, that it doesn't actually have, true inherent nature, and is free from coming and going, and he looks upon all beings without any partiality, regarding them all indivisibly, without distance, without nearness or distance, or concepts of distant and near, without partiality, for the sake of all for the sake of all sentient beings, he strives only for their benefit. So then it says to the protector and Supreme Guru, I continually prostrate with my three doors. And so here, the Guru and Chenrezig are indivisible. They're of the same nature. And so it is like water and milk mixing into one substance. So seeing the Guru and the deity Chenrezig as this indivisibility, like the mixture of water and milk, then the author prostrates with his three doors, the doors of body, speech, and mind. So when we prostrate both through the door of the body, through the door of speech, and through the door of mind. And then he says continuously, so I continually pay homage. And so this is not like, it's not limited to a particular time in the day, or like day and night, but it's continuously without interruption.
간지 죽은 조에 미시게 최탐제라 조화다 원에 순인데 야 독발레스 바레스네로 조화다 최탐제 조에 매바이나 당가서 산게 요마르 왔으네 독발레 바레이나야 최탐제라 조화다 원에 순인데 덴버 추베 조화다 원 요마레스 테나 테테 찍바 뭐지 맞아 자와시럽 나로와 자와시럽 공부를 주지 나가르주나 요승게 자와시럽 나라에 디 찍바 인사래 간지 띵진 저와 좀 가봐매 받게매마 체험해봐, 땀해봐, 원함해봐, 좀해봐, 다제되면 되지면 좁아지 셰셰된 거 조배 산장 많은 게 담바텔라 차세로 손에 탄다 초발 주단데다 딩이 찍고 있어요.
Chirama posong dini di sawashera la kali songo.
chibare kanji tenjin dewar 중
Gangi tenjin.
dewar 중 gakpa meba ge meba kanjisana chwe tamjela gewa yo mare gakpa yo mare ba chig yo mare tade yo mare sunyedi dembar jubi chig yo mare dembar jubi tade yo mare 아니 dembar jubi wa yo mare dembar jubi droya yo mare chig tade mare chig mare 아니 된직 mare 되면 더 말해 니스메디
Gangi tenjin do.
dewar 중 gakpa meba ge meba cheba meba tak meba
Thought meba.
cheba meba tak meba wa meba dro meba 니 망초와 차단 가르송 말했으나 고불로 주지 산지 좀 된다가 처벌 줘봐라 와 니나 단다 갑도 드롬에 수행이 된다 찍어라 했으니 덴버 주고 드롬에 봐 제단이 좋아요라 미 두그러와 미딱 여여여와 니 매수행이 덴버 주고 좋아요 말했어.
So Geshe says that regarding this verse that says, although he sees that all phenomena are free of coming and going, that we might give rise to doubt with respect to that. If we think, that all phenomena is without coming or going, then maybe that means that the Buddha does not exist. But this isn't the case, because even though all phenomena is empty of inherent nature, it is without any true substantial existence, things appear according to the interdependence of karma, cause, and effect. So there's the famous verse from the Sawashera.
Sawashera, root knowledge of the middle way.
Root verses of the middle way.
Yeah.
And so written by Nagarjuna, where it says everything is karmic interdependence, and yet it is without birth, it is without ceasing, it is that without coming, and it is without going. To Dini Suga Chaksalo? So I prostrate to the unsurpassed Supreme Buddha. So this is Nagarjuna's homage to the Buddha. So this first verse is homage, it's a prostration. It's
The second 가르스나 당이버디 sombar tamjawa sungore kanisana 내가 가르쳐봐야나 챌린지 해지매 sombar tamjawa 니디 지기 있으니 니버디 sombar tamjawa s니 베제디 좀기 있으니 코라 챌린지 받들라 sombar tamjawa sungore.
So then the second verse is also following the custom of introduction. So when the author is composing the text, then he begins with the homage or the prostration, and then the second verse is the commitment. So it's the commitment to bring the composition all the way through to its finish.
sombar tamjawa inda somela kare tamjawa sina 다 펜데주네 저베 산제남 담저 주블레 총대에 송어라 다 로아 심제 탐제라 펜바당 로아 심제 탐제라 대화 죽긴데 수레스나 저베 산제레 했으니로 저베 산제 대야 다가마가 유메 깨메리 총요 말했으니 로 대야 담비추 주발라 때네 저베 산제 고반데 토바레 했으니.
So then the next verse says, the sources of benefit and happiness, the perfect Buddhas, come from accomplishing the genuine Dharma. So the purpose of the commitment is essentially, ultimately, to bring about the benefit of all sentient beings. But who is it that brings about the benefit of all sentient beings? Only the completely perfected Buddhas. And so it is with both the commitment to benefit beings through the composition, and also with the commitment to accumulate the merit that leads to complete enlightenment in order to bring about ultimately the benefit of beings that the author writes the second verse.
담주르르 좋은데 대안에 담비추 대야 아니 담비추 주가 대야 담비추 랑레 따고 그랬으니로 랑레 마체나 담비추 랑레 따르는 칸에서나 퇴섬 금수데 야 맞춰 가지고 그랬으니 담주르르 좋은데 대안이 대일 라레 담비추다 주베 산지 쿠판 주베 대라야 아니 담비추라 아니 퇴바체 삼바체 곰바체 방림신도 아니 퇴선 부분도 제거를 했으니 데데 제거에나 조베상이 고반 토베 토그르서 된다고디 다 잔주스 맹냠련 소버데레가 딱 냠련기 다 자세지 그랬습니다.
And so the practice of the Sublime Dharma is subsumed into essentially the three activities of study or listening, contemplation, and meditation. And so it is really essentially through these activities of study, contemplation, and meditation that one gradually reaches, progresses along the path to reaching the state of complete enlightenment. And so Dini 대충 공부 가르라서 그 대충이 걸라 투바 삼바 공부
투바 삼바 공부 다 담비초라 조베 산지지 고반 토벨라 담비초라 투바 삼바 공부 치고 했으니 대 제바디다 조베 산지 고반 톱투바 여바디 자주 쓰비 냠레니 바디 나시기 있으니 좀바 담자와
So it says, since this depends on understanding their practices, I will explain the practices of the Bodhisattva. And so since this commitment is to explain the nature of these three activities of study, contemplation, and meditation regarding bodhicitta, which is really the means to enlightenment.
당이바디 점벌 담자가 레스는데 점벌 담자가 간에서는 자주 쓰면다 저에서는 고반 토벨라나 연습된 바디 시기 있으니 점벌 캐는 바레스는 이바디 저에서는 고반 토벨라 딜레 최고를 쓰는 아디 시기 있으니
So his commitment, the commitment, which is the second verse, is essentially in order that sentient beings can reach this state of complete Buddhahood through engaging in the Bodhisattva's practices. I will explain these practices.
다인자 당아서다 나는 수업들만 뭐마디 다 되는 곳으로 그랬으니다. 나는 수업들만 돼 솔로고 숨바되는 곳으로 그랬으니다.
And so then the first of the Bodhisattva practices begins with the third verse. So this verse is addressing the difficulty of finding or obtaining a precious human rebirth with leisures and endowments. 최적에다 딘비 밀리디 냐가와 시고를 했으니 빼나 가르스나 남지 록나 시르와 남칸나라 차바 갑주치디 두게지게르와 두게지게도 록지 바르르와 람산 라두도 왔으니 대서 미 밀리디 대나시르 냐가와 지글라와 디레스니 다 단다 텐저기 최적에다 딘 밀리디 냐가와 지글라와 텐데 갑라 콤보 갑라 토비 뒤데라 아니 So this verse is essentially saying that as it is so difficult to have an opportunity in which we have a human birth complete with the leisures and endowments, it's so rare. It's like a flash of lightning in the night that lights up the whole space. And it just is like for a moment, it just appears and it lights everything up and then it's gone. And so as in the same way, this human birth is so difficult to find and so easy to lose. It's very difficult to obtain, and yet it is very easily destroyed or lost. And so in this present situation where we have a human birth, which is so difficult to obtain and so easily lost, we need to recognize its value and realize just how precious and rare it is. And so therefore we won't let the opportunity go to waste if we truly understand the value of this opportunity. If we don't recognize that our situation as a human being is very rare and precious, if we don't recognize that, then it will be difficult to really be interested in accomplishing Dharma, because we won't have a concept of how precious this opportunity is.
가래도 가래이나 잘라이나래 배샤이나래 아니 설기리 무기리 가래인바이나 사시보인바이나 미도도 닦고야고 얘기도 왔어요.
So when it comes to objects, material objects, when people recognize their value, then they are much more cautious, or they really take a great deal of interest in those things, in those possessions, like whether it's gold or silver or money. That's easy to recognize the value, and therefore there's a great deal of interest towards those material objects.
그 다고야고 얘데 짜침보 인상 다고야고 개발했어. 대단 직바 밀루를 무시다 짜침보 뭐 하거나 아니 그 밀루디 짜침보 뭐 하거나 된 다고야고 개발했어.
So when we understand, when we recognize something is valuable, when we think that it is precious, then we take good care of it. We really take ownership of that thing. And then if we recognize, how precious this human birth is, then likewise, we will use it wisely. We will take good care of it in the sense that we will put it to good use.
근데 손상 밀루를 무시 치다니 삼로다나 도바 깨시바레스 물린데라모네 미사야 tunjur mambuji 깨데르 디도차나 렐로보시니 깨기레스니 도바 레미스바 말에 이나야 틴도 미수도 수이나 깨바 mam보네 다 깨와 톡마메바네 깨와 mam보질네 데네 소소이 디바도 다 데르 차발라 데네 시네타 미깨와데 렘바레스니 미깨와레 렐로보요 마레스니.
So one may give rise to doubt regarding this, because one may say, there are so many billions of people in the world. How can the human life be so precious? But when you think about it with a greater perspective, like from the Buddhist point of view, and that we have taken life after life and cyclic existence, endless, since beginningless time, and all sorts of different life forms, to take a life as a human being is extremely rare and precious. It is not easy to come by any means.
자물린데라 가시겠다 소소이 속 소소 찡이들에 도와서 다디 탑기보시오래 찍내다 초기 내당 하모고의 긴지 인기래 소소기 속 소소기 제바인바이나 이나야다 데라 껴왕 앞제 버도 미르링기 말했습니다. 추나라 손요래 했으니
그러니까 공다 양자생물나
자물린데라 가시기 소소기 속 소소기 찡이들에 도와
소소
슈치들에 도와 라시쟁이들에 도와 다 디저디 소소기 밀루를 무시데 짜치모이 뭐 하고 먹어 버렸으니로 데리 제바인바이나 데네 겨왕 앞제 버도로 미기 밀루 큐니 토고 말했으니 추나라 손요래 했으니.
So there are some who really clearly do not recognize the value of a human birth, the preciousness of human birth, because there are those who take their own lives or commit suicide. And this is because this can only occur if one doesn't recognize the preciousness of the human birth. And so it is said in the scriptures that if one takes one's own life, then one is born 500 times in different various times and different forms and lower states for 500 times before one is capable of taking rebirth as a human. That there's no way one will be born as a human for 500 lives.
Yeah. 데르 손자다 미르르 뭐지 짜침보 인자 미르르 뭐실라 짜침보 인바 좀지 카기 라바 좀 많이 봐다 밀루 톱네 다 가래 두고고도 초 가래 두고고도 인지미지 전부 그랬으니.
So, it's not enough to just say with our mouths, it is difficult to obtain a human birth, and it is precious, that the human birth is precious. Instead, we also have to understand and be diligent about then engaging in Dharma with this precious human birth. With that, we need to actually understand how to utilize it by understanding the Dharma practices.
근데 손자 내가 단단 대지를 좀 붙이 톱이 뒤되라 안에 다그다시 아니 코알에 좀이 된다라 아니 소소이 냠내 치고 그랬으니로 아니 산지에 송 라마지비신이야 보때 퇴바치 삼바치 고바치로 대달라 때는 소소이 저베산이지 코반토 저베산이 코반토라 때네 아니 신의 심지 탐제야 저베산이 코반마 꾀디 다 참주승비 다 chanjugi simbi choba diredo tenza tene nyendan sendo yawa mebani katuye na nyense tuichukdo ta ngaso nyense tuichukdo sunye di an tsenla ya ta gom jab nyamlen chi sungu yosa mare senero tanda lain sumba diro nyendan sendo yawa mebani sunye di kenso nyendan sendo kaisana shogwe toba cheba ibaina de virginia shogwe toba chena nyingung sambachi gonda gombachi 다 대린 터바지 다 나니 선영아 삼진이 있으니 다 제라 다 달로 단다 로춘중에 제라가 로숨주 십질레서니 넘주 주자는 신의 냠렌치기 라이케디 야고요서 말했어요. 대린 터바지나 니모 람상 삼 람상 gonda 곰 티나 인세 요음에 번들어 숨고요서 했어요.
So then, in this case, then, for the sake of ourselves and other sentient beings who are trapped within the suffering of samsara, we can rely on qualified spiritual teachers, and then based on their instruction, engage in the practice of virtue by engaging in study or listening, contemplation, and meditation. And this is, for the purpose of eventually reaching the state of enlightenment and benefiting limitless beings. So then it says in the text, now that we have this great vessel of freedoms and resources so difficult to find, so that we may liberate ourselves and others from the ocean of samsara, day and night without distraction, to listen, contemplate, and meditate is the practice of the Bodhisattva. So, as it says, day and night without distraction, it means that we don't engage in practice for a day and then think, when I'm older, like when I'm in my older age, I'm really going to dedicate myself to Shine meditation or shamatha. No, we have to do now. And Geshe says that, in the morning we study or we listen, in the afternoon we contemplate, and in the evening or at night we meditate. And this should be continuous. This effort should be continuous, day after day, without an attitude of putting things off for the future.
다 인세 여험에 보스니냐 챤라의 공점 대바임바이나 되는서 수고라 뉴기기로 왔으니 된데서나 인세 여험에 수녀에 때 니마찌라 소소이다 쇼웨이 니몬 관다숨라 고셔점니 퇴섬고스 최고야 다니 제 텔라테나니 년섬 공바 터바나 셈바 공바 최바됐다 찬주스비 냐블레 이 숨고도 왔으니.
So it says to listen, contemplate, and meditate is the practice of a bodhisattva. So this is this continuous practice of study or listening, contemplating, and meditating both day and night without interruption.
디레송자 소보다 담비추 조비산지 고관 조벨라 다 담비추라 퇴섬 공수 마시나 디기요 말했으니.
So if we don't listen, contemplate, and meditate upon the sublime Dharma, then there is no means to achieve enlightenment, to achieve liberation and enlightenment.
잠린데라 미수도 수에나 대화되바다 동을 메대와 지버지냐 레스니로 동을 되게 수지요 말이야. 대화 죽고나 땐도 대화디 가르스나 조베산지 고마마도요 말했으니. 또 조베산지 고반텔라야 규메키메를 줘요 말에 소소 깔레자고. 깔레 잡아텔라야 소소이다 담비철라 투삼 곰숨치고래 했으니. 다 퇴바치고 제바이나 퇴바치고 제 곰바 마체나 아니 나도 계산기야 계절 총반나시 아니 퇴바메 곰바냐 라돔 타글라 제바타나 싫어 대시 숨고래 했으니 퇴바 여바숨지 되게 말에 곰바치고래 했으니 아니 곰바 여바숨지 되게 말에 퇴바치고래 했으니 다 곰바 매바치 퇴바치고 제바이나야 아니 축보세네 찡바다 하스네 위초보디 아니 귤라 세나 제바나시래 했으니
Iti yang ikumta ti karede
자마디 디레 곰바메베 터바 곰큐니 마제바체 터바징에 제딩이 되는도 대체바이나 미축보 세나 제바나시다 어디래 했으니 근데 손자 넘버스 인지미지 단단 가서 무엇이 뭐 배반나라야도 아니 경zo 나라야 용시바레 아니 곰게야라 당보 망시 터바도 고고를 했으니 터바 가도에나 네가 생각도 곰게야라다 삼로단지 컬러도 펜도 연구를 했으니 대자 넘버도 당보 터바치 계신 모시고래 람성코라 견자 당보라 맞아가 견자 니발 로토고 말에 빼나 라둠 라폼 메비 미디 잘라 자도 보면 좋았으니
So everybody in the world wants happiness, and everybody wishes to avoid suffering. But the true happiness, the only real happiness that is true and lasting, stable happiness, is the happiness or bliss of complete enlightenment or Buddhahood. So in order to strive towards achieving that, then the method is engaging in the Dharma practices through listening, contemplating, and meditating. We have to engage in all three. If we just engage in one without the others, then our efforts are not complete. So it is said that that one who tries to meditate without having engaged in listening is like somebody without hands, like with stubs for hands, trying to scale a cliff, like a rock face. So you can't scale or climb a rock face without hands. So the process of listening is like hands that enable us to climb this cliff. And then likewise, if one engages in listening without meditation, then it is like a rich person who's very greedy, like a miserly person with his wealth, who is just greedy with his wealth. And so, it's important to engage in meditation, but if we don't have a solid foundation, then there is no basis for the meditation to progress. So that foundation is created through the process of listening. It's like if you have a stair, like a set of stairs, in order to get to the second step, you have to first pass the first step. You step on the first step and then onto the second step, but you can't bypass a whole bunch of steps. You have to go one by one up the steps.
Nyesem gomba, twesam go, tenje sonza, twebache, sambache, gombache bangazo, pangrimchide, yamachewa chebadi, ta chanju sumi nyamlengi chasheji rese.
So, as it says here, listening day and night, engaging in the practices of listening, contemplating, and meditating, then we engage in the Bodhisattva practices, essentially step by step. So this is a big part of the Bodhisattva's practice, the practice of listening, contemplating, and meditating.
Zobe sanji kuma dupta madula yedi soso lapala yore senita soso kawa drogu karichi udo soso lapala yore senita.
So as the Buddha said, it is up to us, what we do, whether we accomplish the Dharma or not. It's in our hands.
Tedesonda ane sanji chuminde karisung yore sena nyeni kyola tarbe taptingi ane tarba rale sheba chasen nye kyarandola tarba zobe sanye koban jubegi tapchanan tyen shayore da tarba dubda madula yedi kyarandola pala yore sumede ta nenga chumore do asenda.
So as the Buddha himself has said, I have shown you the way to liberation. I've given you the path to liberation. Whether or not you accomplish liberation or traverse that path is entirely up to you. That's in your hands.
하게만 딜랑아서 계속 중요해. 가인스나 추게 뻔베 텐저를 텐여치에서는 수명으로 왔으니. 추게 제송가 받침be 간델 하게만 나러와. 미루를 붙이디 아니 텐여 받쳐서 송도 왔으니. 미루를 붙이디 된다데 말이고 제조 송에 디 인사했으니. 추게 뻔베 텐저 텐여치. 직된 추게 킹으로와 직된 추게디 뻔 텐저기 미루를 붙이디 되어봐 제시오 수행에 되다 딩이는 같이 인사했어. 간제 하기만 하고.
간제.
하기야.
Lagya.
만나로라 되게 손이 됐으네.
Pipechaningra.
아래.
Gandin Lagya. So as Jason Kappa says, so we need to make this precious human birth meaningful. We have to give it meaning. As Jason Kappa says in Gandin Lagyapa, this in order to give this precious human birth meaning, in order to make it truly precious or to make it meaningful, then we must abandon the 8 worldly concerns and practice Dharma single-pointedly.
어디? 다 셜로가 시바디 가르친 거라서나 다 코란 레센 시바이나 포유봉화에 쓴 거라. 레센 시바이나 포유봉 쓴 거라다. 포유봉화.
So then the second verse is essentially giving the instruction to abandon one's homeland.
Homeland. 다디 가르친 거라서나 도 삼로 단디 포유봉을 소소 롱바 파마 소소 있게서지 바바 아마이 롱바도 빵다고 그거를 근데 숨바 말했으니.
So when we hear that, we may think that it's literal, that what that means is we really literally have to abandon like our birthplace, the place where our mother and father raised us, that we have to like actually abandon that physical place. And it certainly doesn't mean that we need to abandon our mother and father.
Yeah. 가르친 거랬으나 다 맞sol라 인기 초라 도자 추다를 요송으로와 인기 초라 도자 추다를 자유 초라 셔당 매달 바로 송바레스 신기바디 즉 당보는이바디 소소기다 파마 빙자 소소 가부 가모 소소 인인인자 아샹다 디졸라 세와 다 되샤기 추다를 요서나 추 발랍나시 조바네 소소라 세와 슈슈보시 불레기도 왔어 그러와 이켄송아 아니 자유 초라 셔당 매달 바로 소소기다 레코니 다다니니가 미임바 찍바치냐라고 이나야 찍라츠와 슈슈볼레 티 내나서 중나야 람소코라 아세 내딜레 타나스니 냠발레 다딜라 아니 람소코라 아 코다 시네 디 디레레 이 삼로지 리기 도와신
간데 삼발라케노
다딜라 치코 두와 영화쇼 찍찍시와도 고 시네 가스니 삼로 딘데 로니 리기도 미치기 따연데 미니라라 그래서 니엔다 다니
So what this is referring to is like what we're really to abandon is the mind of strong attachment and aversion. So as it says, attachment towards close ones stirs us up like water. Hatred towards our enemies burns in us like fire. And so if you think about it, those who are like closest to us, or in those situations of like one's homeland, one's relatives and closest friends, one's boyfriends and girlfriends, these strong connections often cause us to be very passionate. So we have, a mind that is like strong waves, like the movement of strong waves, so that it's very disruptive, it's disturbing inwardly to our mind. And then there are those who we consider to be enemies. Whenever there is strong attachment, then there is also strong aversion. So there are those who we maybe have really strong animosity towards, just our hated enemies who we even think, we actually want harm to come from them. We actually wish them misfortune, or we may even think, I'd be happy if they died, if they were just gone. And so the mind is the same, and actually the beings are the same too. There's really no difference, in any sentient being other than our own perception. So there are beings too, equal sentient beings, and then there's the single mind. And then the mind has this very strong emotion of very strong love and passion for one individual, and then the complete opposite, this very strong hatred or ill will towards another individual. So the only difference, is the perception, the attitude. So it's that is what is disruptive is the mind of attachment and aversion.
근데 송자 다디 소소히 미 좋아인 바 찍바질라 찍자월레 찍라 밥 찍 셰당레디 가르쳐 버렸으나 찍 랑도르 집에 띠모 면한지 송으로와 찍 야가총 통 찍라 밥 누가 통해디 수기 쳐버렸으나 가서 띠모 마리꼬 온지 쳐버렸으나 timu marikwa ignorance onje chabares te ta tenza poyu di sushazena nyemo tosum di chade sen poyu pongsuyendi ta pamare mendo wasen pamade sula monzigo sena nyemo tosum de pango de nyemo tosum de onje tsobo timu ju onje mishibe onje chigla yagaton chigla dugaton nyemo tosum de onje ani ta loñi legi de michigla ta yonde loñi legi do wasen ta nyemo tosum de pango resen.
So we have, these two individuals who are really the same in essence, as all sentient beings are the same in essence, but one we regard with great love, and then the other we regard with strong hatred. One we think is better for some reason, and one we think is inferior or worse. And the reason for that perception is the cause of ignorance, the causal ignorance. So it is because we are under the influence of ignorance that we have these two minds of attachment and aversion. So it is based, the seed of the afflictive emotions is essentially the basic emotion of ignorance. So because our minds are colored by the afflictive emotions, the three poisons, then what we need to abandon, when it says we need to abandon our homeland, is the mind of these three poisons, the mind of afflictive emotions. We need to uproot ignorance. Because as long as we are under the influence of ignorance, then we have these two minds.
ngari lomba le de resene ro ari lomba di ni phayu du cha de kan yesena ni chala ning ju ji thongba yin ba na ngatela chaba ki gi resene ro mi ji gi ngala dungba yin ba na ngala khola shadan ki gi ro wasen ro
mi ji dongla
mi ji ngala shuba yin ba na ngala khola maga ba cha gi ro wasen ari lomba la de cha gi ro wasen te insa chaba ki shadan ki 타도 콘도도 게 보라 아리 롱바에 사제라 때는 ngake bara wasen te insa ari lomba di pang tu ba yin ba na nyemo tosun pambara wasene o tene lata lomba suso la tene ta nyemo tosun kebadi tela tene pango ba khola phayu mingta ba rese.
So really this saying we need to abandon our homeland, this is symbolic because Geshe said, for instance, he's now here in America. He can't say he was born in America, so it's not actually his homeland in that sense, but it is his homeland as long as he becomes enmeshed in the mind of attachment and aversion. So if he sees, beautiful objects or things that he finds nice and attractive, that then he gives rise to the mind of attachment towards. And then on the other hand, maybe somebody comes along and punches him, and then maybe he would have anger towards that person. That person would immediately become an enemy. So he's given rise to this mind of attachment and aversion. And so then in that case, he could say that in this sense, he would need to abandon his homeland of America in this sense, because, but what this is referring to is actually the afflictive emotions, because whenever one becomes entangled in a situation that causes strong afflictive emotions, then that is kind of symbolically what is meant by the homeland.
phayu pong sunya di nyemo to so pa la sha song wa sen ro ta nyemo to so pang go na nyemo to so pa la ma so nye de na nyemo to so pang tu gu ma re ke gyam na nyemo to so pang tu gu ma re
kare nye na
nyemo to so pang tu ma ro ani ke gyam na pingi ma re pesha de na nyemo to so pang tu gu ma re tim la da tu ro da kam ju gya ba yin ba na nyemo to so pang tu ma ro sen tim ma so kam ju gya do yes 계획전에 니모토선 빵투고 말아. 다 니모토선 빵이라 가르치고 그랬으나 네 엠바팅 우리 공자 그랬어. 다 시바디 데 디엔사라 숨바디 네 엠바테 바스.
So how is it then that we can abandon the three poisons or the afflictive emotions? We can't abandon them through sleeping, like, sleeping won't help us to abandon the afflictive emotions. We can't abandon them by yelling. Yeah, if we like yell, I'm going to abandon my afflictive emotions, that's not going to help us abandon our afflictive emotions. If we try to abandon them through money or paying somebody off, then we won't be able to abandon them. If we try to take our afflictive emotions to court, and through like some sort of lawsuit or something, we won't be able to abandon them. So what is the way to abandon the afflictive emotions? It is to go, first to go to solitary places. So that is, then takes us to our third verse, which is regarding seeking the refuge of solitary places.
chanju semba korang momaji nyamlen chedan da ta ngasoji nyamlen chedan ti zdag yo sama resne nyamlen chedan de lobjon chedan je do ti zdag ma resne.
So then the third verse says, abandoning negative places, the afflictions gradually diminish.
이루냐 밤에 뭐 림기 주에서는 맞다 레 당고라 셔바라 맞도 더불어 송바레스네.
So this is referring to, or this is the first line is like a specific advice for beginners, people like ourselves. It's necessary for us as beginners to find, to practice in solitary places, because then gradually, when there's that stillness, then the afflictive emotions will gradually diminish. So sometimes we hear stories of, the Bodhisattvas of the past and the way in which they engaged in the practice of the path. But Geshe said that, these days and like the practice of the great Bodhisattvas of the past, or the way in which the former Bodhisattvas practice, and the way in which like we need to begin practicing on the path is a little bit different. Yeah, so there are different methods, and that the method of the past is of some is not
different.
It's different. It's not pertinent to this.
Different in the context pena yulnya pangbe yulnya badi pangni nyamo khalegale diguru sungu doas rawa khar sungu resena pena ngaso soro ji chanju sambatu ji pena de mejigi kondo ji langyo yo bayina rawa mejigi chanju sambala kondo ji langba yin bayina chanju sambaji lamsang soba gungu resen rawa soba gungu resen lamsang kondo ji nyembo soba tingi rawa sen rawa ngaso soro la mejigi kondo ji langba yin bayina lamsang soba gumtu ma rawa sen
de kondogi wang
kondoji wang shor bayinsa kola lamsa gyage gyage rawa sen teinsa kondo sasagi shikorang la tidi made bayina ngaso logdo bayin bayina kondo dile tu ma tizen yul nyamba kondo sasagi shiji doa di pangna ani kondo di kale kale meba chagu doa sen chanju sebe kanisane kondo sasagi shikorang la shuni soba tato gumtu rawa sen di khabar doa sen.
So the difference is this, in our case, it's helpful if we abandon situations that incite negative emotions. If we go to solitary places, if we kind of retreat from outer circumstances or the world in order to practice. But in the stories of some of the great bodhisattvas of the past, the situation was such that, say for instance, there was somebody who incited that bodhisattva to anger, to give rise to anger. Immediately the bodhisattva could apply the antidote of patience and meditate on great patience, as patience is the antidote to anger. And so then maybe it would be even useful for that bodhisattva to be in the presence of those who would give him a reason to meditate on patience. But in our case, maybe it doesn't really work like this. If there's an outer circumstance that causes us to become angry, we can't actually generate patience. We can't give rise to patience. Instead, we fall under the influence of anger. We become angry, and maybe we begin fighting with the person. So in that case, that's a perfect example of needing to abandon the cause of anger, to retreat from the causes. So that's why it says abandoning negative places, the afflictive emotions gradually
Oh,
diminish.
soba gome tanda ta kondo sasa yi shidi mewa ina tene ta maso kondo sasa yi shi mena kondo sagu marwa sa tene kondo sasa yi shidi pa pangsung wara ta chanju sembe de kondo sasa yi shi de yoba ina tando kondo da nyamlen che la pedo chimbo go resin.
So in that case, we have to be careful to avoid situations that may cause us to become angry. So by abandoning the causes of negative emotions, then we gradually get control over our negative emotions. Whereas the great, there are some, a very high capacity, like the great Bodhisattvas of the past, who in the midst of the most challenging of circumstances could give rise to great patience and meditate on patience regardless, without giving rise to anger, even when the causes are there.
Oh, today is a tan niwa de karona name mebe gejor nganje pel naming sanata no sim pazu mayamba yamba yana so so chuji nyamle je cheba yana ngone shuga ngabo lang sim tambu shibu yere se name mebe sim pazu mayamba yamba yana gewa dubna yere 아니 소소 칸도의 교주를 가르쳐 봐야 바이나 고 야부시부 자기도 왔으니라.
간데나?
남행면나 셈파도 마양 바이나 남행메베 교주 많이 별 송에도 가르쳐 놓았으나 남행은 셈파도 양사기시 다 콘도 사사단 되샤께서단 세단께서 이 시딘데 매바인 바이나 소소 겨와 두네레 로종 제바인 바이나레 쿠심 심 제바 쿠심부 사자데라 맞아 람사 거라다 내가 가리는 딱 떨어져 제도도 왔습니다.
So then it says, without any distraction, virtuous activity naturally increases. So when we find, a solitary place where we can engage in our practice of virtue or our Dharma practice, because we don't have, the outer distractions, then we can get up early and we can engage in the practice of virtue and without many distractions or many things that pull us away from that, without outer circumstances that cause us to give rise to really strong emotions like strong anger or fear or desire. If we're in a quiet place, with few distractions, then we can really devote ourselves to either the practice, the meditation, or study, and therefore the virtuous endeavors naturally increase.
근데 송상 답변나 가르랬으나 남칼라라와 남칼라 timba 매바이나 남카 몽보시고 모팅팅 니마 샤나 니마 짱마시고 샤르기도 와세네로와 님공 다 챈라이나야 남칼라 timba 매바이나 나와다 카르마도다 차딩이 샤르투라 대나지 소소이다 남행 매나 아니 셈 짱마체 내가 가르치는 게두 가르쳐 봐야나 다다 룩투고도 와세네로와 근데 송상 때네 리파 담배 철랑이 셰케 송으로 리파디 짱마 시고 여바이바이나 아니 가서 철라 삼바이나레 곰바이나레 토바체바이나 람송코나 딱딱하다 지 네바테 번이 두고도 왔으니 네 가르쳐 버렸으나 네 엠바들라 데네 쳐바이나 데네 데네 용토바디 다 용토를 했으는다 잠시스네 냠네 이 차시지를 했으니.
So when there is a clear sky that doesn't have any clouds, then in the morning the sky is like bright blue, it's like clear and this deep blue, and then in the middle of the day there's like at noon, the sun is shining bright and the sky is clear and everything is really bright and vivid. And then at night, if there are no clouds, then you see everything very clearly, like all of the stars and the moon, they're very sharp and clear. So in the same way, that is how our mind becomes when it is free of discursive thought, free from all sorts of distractions. It becomes clear and still and very alert, very vivid. And so therefore we can engage in virtue, we can practice virtue with clarity. That's naturally what happens when the mind is clear, when awareness is bright and vivid. And so when we engage in Dharma, the activities of Dharma, study, contemplation, and meditation, with that sort of place that engenders clarity, where there aren't too many distractions or causes of giving rise to afflictive emotions, then we can give rise to certainty. The mind develops real certainty in Dharma, in the Dharma. So in that regard, then it's beneficial to resort to secluded places. So as it says, through clear awareness, ascertainment of the Dharma arises. To rely on solitary places is the practice of the Bodhisattva.
Ari lombala ne embatemba yana tene khangla ya tretu mare churi login tretu marwa Ari lombala che ne embatene deba imbaina tene khangla dinge zo khangla te worwa ani login churi te worwa tade nega ne embatene khabu isare sine
So if we can, so as this is one of the Bodhisattva practices or instructions, to resort to solitary places, to stay in retreat, and devote ourselves to Dharma. If we don't have the opportunity to do that in this life, or if we do have the opportunity, then we should take that opportunity. And if we don't have the opportunity, then we should pray that we will have that opportunity in future lifetimes, or that opportunity may arise in the future. Because of course it's probably difficult in America. Things are a little bit more complicated. Like if you just resort to secluded places, how are you going to pay the rent? You have to pay rent somehow. So Rebe.
Kangla tego na tene ne embatenga je kangla tetu marwasine te jindagi piro wasine
So if you have to pay somebody rent to stay in a secluded place, then you better have a benefactor.
Piro wasine ta khare sene tanda ngaso ni gandela chik shuwore na yungi pangbe nyamo ringi dipsene pena shochine jogre shochine dembare ro khare sungor sana nyama michi Geshe ta Geshe ingiro Geshe na ta tabati lo gengoji soba gungi yesene ne embadila chimba resene disonga
So in some cases it may be
joke the word mama resene
so there's this joke regarding how sometimes it can actually be self-defeating to resort if you become too comfortable with resorting to secluded places. So there's this famous story about a Geshe who went into retreat to a solitary place to practice patience.
This on the jela Quran tabachi yachi and again karichi yesene somba ya shuwa resene.
So then one monk, found him and came to him and said, Genla, what are you doing? And so then the Geshe said, well, I'm meditating on patience. So then the person who had asked him, sort of was questioning him, then kind of thought about it for a moment. Or he So then he sort of started thinking, how is he practicing patience?
Can I get basa lava resini?
Lama Shambhadre.
Chabadigi.
So then, having thought about it for a moment, then the monk said, "Well, then eat shit." And so then immediately the Geshe became angry and he said, "Well, you eat shit." So then the monk responded saying, hey, you said you were out here meditating on patience. Clearly, you're not practicing patience.
이 가리켜 쇼바레스나 서버 고메하고 서비 표현하고로 서버 곰단됐다 서버 곰나 간데스 곰거르스네다 터바 마치비 뀌어레스네.
And so what is the fault that is illustrated here? The fault is that by meditating on patience, this here in this case, he didn't have the solid foundation of listening or study. Because if you haven't if you don't have like the former experience of study or listening, then you won't have a basis for meditation.
디레스네로. 다 시바디 가르스 모르스는 미탁바때 마스네로. 미탁바. 소수 버디디 미탁바 임바 하고 그랬으니. 다이 라와나시 미탁바 임바 하고 먹어나 아니 다 미탁바 간데스 된 거랬으나 대리 미세디 다 되네요. 유르도베 자시 소소 텔. 아니 베베 주베 노르세시드 루기 정가 남시 정거 포 세딜로나 로다 게세 라니 송바로. 또 소소기 유르인도다 다 대딩에 파마뿐님도 대 아니 저보다 저모도 그냥도 대 유르모다 소소 세워 가보면 뭐 대대나야래 시주디 소소소는 로고도 세네로 어디 송다.
So then the next verse is touching upon the truth of impermanence, death and impermanence. So we all know that the nature of this body is impermanence. We all know that our lives will eventually come to an end. And so in the verse it says, we will part from each of the loved ones we have long befriended. We will leave behind the wealth we have so diligently amassed. Our consciousness, the guest, will cast away the guest house, the body. To relinquish this life is the practice of a Bodhisattva. So we have, those friends and relatives who we cling to so dearly, who are, so dear to us, our parents, our friends, our relatives. And we, no matter how close we are to them, temporarily, eventually separation will come because death is inevitable. So when the time of death comes, we will all part from one another.
근데 다 베베 주베 노르제 슈드레 소에디 다 소소 규 노르 주베라 아니 베제 몽보치고레 세네로 베베 주베 노르제 소소 다 칼레게베 노르디니 시드르디 파 샤니 조고레 모도 냠도 키에미도 하세네.
And it says, the wealth that we have so diligently amassed will be left behind. So when we die, no matter how much wealth and possessions we have amassed, no matter how much we have gathered, it will all be left behind. We will lose it all at the time of death.
다 소소 야다 칸데지 뱅나 샤고도 다 가와 샤고도 동알지 도와 싹베 동알 수메 동알지 도와 세네로 당보 싹베 동알 데네 수메 동알 아니 락베 동알 대송다 단다 샨디 되고 주주 주문하라 가르송한다 싹다 소다 라베 동알기 송도와 세네로 라와 규주벨라 당보 칼레시고 야고로 칼레 갸베가라 간예지도 아니 다 숭베까블라다 싹동 숭다야 tel라 간디스 소월 뱅나나 샤고도 가레 샤고네 데라 동al 제리기 도와세네 라기레세네 동al 제리기 도와세네 뎀바리 도와세네.
So when it really is the case, that people go to such lengths and make such a great effort to accumulate wealth and possessions, but it's all just difficulty and suffering throughout the whole thing. In the beginning, we go through so much difficulty to actually accumulate the wealth and possessions. Then in the middle, we go through a lot of difficulty and strife about protecting our wealth. So once you have the wealth, you think, okay, now what do I do with it? What do I do with it to increase it? Should I put it in a safe? Should I put it in some sort of, like holding fund? What should I do, to keep it? What can I do to keep it? So we're always suffering, with fear of regarding trying to protect it. And then in the end, there's the suffering of losing it. So Shantideva says in the Bodhicharya Avatara, there is wealth. Wealth, those who are rich experience the suffering of accumulating, protecting, and losing their wealth. And so that is definitely true. The whole process of trying to amass wealth is really just one of suffering.
사우단 다 베베드는 다 벤나 가르산 류기 중간 남시 정보 포로 송한다 벤나 가르샤와서나 마소다 되네 마 캐나다도 캠지 조바인 바이나 종하나라 디기로 와스니로 종하나라 디디 다 상이 데린 종하나라데 상이 종한디 파샤 아니 소소치부 조거로 와스니 종한키니 조사랑 말아 와스니 대가자 류기 중간 남시 정보 포로 송도 와스니.
So then it says, our consciousness, the guest, will cast aside this guest house of a body. And so if you think about the experience of somebody who's wandering, from town to town, or if we are traveling, we go and stay in a hotel, and temporarily we have this experience of living in this hotel, but it's just for like a night or two, and then we leave and we move on to something completely different. So this is really similar to our experience with this body. Our mind, our consciousness, is really just like a guest. This is only a temporary dwelling, and at the time of death, our consciousness will move on.
진짜 손상 당가서 류다 남시니보디 류디 조칸 게스트 카르다 게스트 하우스체 남시디 아니 게스트 레드 왔습니다.
And so the body is a guest house, and the consciousness is a guest.
야, 어디래도 대상 다 주디 남시치고 줘야래마도 아니 류 줘야면 왔으니.
And so when we go on, our consciousness will go on alone, and our body will not. Our body will just be cast off. It will just be left behind.
다 수부 만도와 디템바를 했으니 빼나 수부 가시기 메다땅이래 가시기 싸워라 베게 소소소 룩소체니 된다 류 줘야면 왔으니. 다 줘야디 심 남시디 두고도 왔으니. 다 남시 될라야 야가체나 콜라마 야가지 박자샤로와 누가 쟤는 누가지 박자샤 이 박자디 소소키네 줘야 돼. 빼나 니만 길랑 가서 줘대 바인바이나 소소 팀나지도와 팀나 친기로와 팀나 가서 다 딘데 팀나지도와 니 거도 두고 란자 누구도 왔으니 대나시 남시 디레 디기타 프린치샤요다 기위 박자 미유 박자 대샤 아니 소소 껴와지 뭐 팀나
샤도도 뭐래
말은 딘데도디
팔로기야
디
레샤도
남시 두디 디님도 팔로기네 로레스 겨와사나 기위 박자샤 미조와시나 미조 박자샤 이 겨와시만 줘야 돼 남시 코너 줘야 돼 왔으니.
So we all know very well that the body is left behind. When somebody dies, then the body is either cremated, it's burnt by fire, or it's buried under the ground, and it disappears gradually. It ceases to be, and then but the consciousness does not cease. The consciousness continues on as sort of just carried along by the karmic imprints. Those who have who have created positive karmic imprints in their mind streams will go along with those positive karmic imprints, and based on those positive karmic imprints, then positive circumstances will manifest for them. On the other hand, those who have negative karmic imprints will be carried along by those negative karmic imprints, and likewise, they too will have negative circumstances that manifest from those imprints. So it's like a shadow. Actually, the way that it functions, consciousness with the karmic imprints, or the storehouse of propensities, is much like a shadow. Like if you stand in the bright sun and then look at the shadow, which has this kind of ephemeral kind of form, but it's like that. If you it did not be
pena namshi de chukyawachiman durowa ta de tendo soso yaga cheba imbayana gyawasana gewi bhacha namshi gi tendo shagirowa nigyawachim duga chebana duga gi bhacha namshi gi tendo shagirowa o te resi
Yeah. So anyway, I already said, sorry. It's like that the karmic imprints are what go on with the consciousness, and then based on the type of karmic imprints, then one takes a rebirth, a next life. Whether it is positive or negative depends on one's propensities or karmic imprints.
텐데 손자 아니 파마 빙게나 소소 시루디 파마 빙게도 소소 카테고도 왔습니다. 되니 소소 사세비 노르단 소소이나 시루디 소소 치부 줘야도 왔습니다. 그래도 되니 루이단 남시 이나야 소소선 조고도 왔습니다. 대인사 다 소소 있다 야가체나 소소 냥고래 파마 빙게 빙게 말에 누가 제나야 규변주기 핑기면도 대인상 루이단 남신이보다 정강다 정보나 시리샤스네 대인상 맞었다 세딜라 초주베디 개천보시고 레스네 수직이 로바칭이요 말했으네 냐와나라 냥대바이는 소소기 스웨샤기르모도 수직이 라발로요 말해 소소 대원용나 소소기 스웨샤르모 수직이 스웨바 말해 대인상 소소 라발라 라레도 왔으네 대인상 최딜라다 세딜로단 게세라레 인소인데 세딜 소소 tenjurgi chö chubge da dimi milu tobadi ani chö rangla lue tangba imbayina ka chamju sende nyamle re sing.
So that's it then. All of the concerns of this life which we consider to be kind of like the center of our lives, like our friends and relatives, our wealth and possessions. These things are very body. All of these things are just temporary and fleeting. Ultimately we will be separated from all of our friends and our loved ones. Ultimately, all of our wealth and possessions, all of our things will just be left behind and completely inconsequential. Ultimately, we will separate from our very body. Our consciousness will go on and our body will be left behind. So in that case, at the time of death, none of these things, none of these worldly things will make any difference whatsoever. Our friends and relatives, our wealth, or our body, whether they are good or bad, they will not affect our minds at all. Or they will not affect our future lives at all. So in that case, the best that we can do is to practice according to the 37 Bodhisattva practices. When we have this human birth complete, this precious human birth complete with leisures and endowments, to just practice Dharma, to focus single-pointedly on the practice of virtue, on the spiritual practice, will be the most beneficial thing that we can do for our future, for life, for our lives, or like from where we go after this life. If we use this life well, then we will see the consequences of that after our death. If we create the causes to be reborn in hell, there's nobody who is condemning us to hell. There's no other person who has responsibility for what happens to us other than ourselves. So our own fortune or misfortune is in our own hands.
다들 손자 단다 미루르 보제 된다 된바 토비 카텔라 되니 쳐마주 아니 니망아 조서 레가치 니만이 사페바데 니만이라 다 파티라죠 아니 가부가부님도 캠죠 아니 소소 데모라 따가죠 어디지 쳐봐지 말이나 되니 미루르 보제도 촐라 땅바레스 되니 시베 갑라로 뒤주게 주고 가서 대바이 바이나 시베 갑라고네 다시네 셈바 교바케 바이나 되니 jellu tebares 소소 데베 갑라 따다 마치 아니 시렌데 되니 nye chik che ni che nga pesa so nga chu dube rama so chik chik nga ta nyawa la kesa re cheba yana ta jeli cheba re su chik soyo mare so su so ba re sene tende sonza namadu zo chadang one milu rum bo che de la one so so chi tambi cho la tosam gu dum chi one lama gi wishin ya boten meba chi teba chi so sa de jan chen de so so gi milu rum bo che de se de la one chi chue namda ji dube di ta la len so ta kyang do la bala yore sene.
So essentially, if we spend our whole lives, like working during the week, and then like during the weekend when we have our time off, we go out with friends, we go on dates with boyfriends and girlfriends, we go to parties, we go see movies and so forth. then this really, if we spend our lives this way, it will have been a waste ultimately, and we will have regret at the time of death, because if we, during this lifetime when we have a precious human rebirth, and we are healthy and well, and we have the means to engage in spiritual practice, if we lose that opportunity, if we're lazy about it, and then at the time of death, we'll be terrified. We'll think, I wasted my whole life when I had the opportunity to accomplish what was truly meaningful, to engage in Dharma practice or engage in spiritual practice. I didn't. I wasted the time putting it off for the future. And now I have so much regret. We'll have all of this regret, and then we'll think, now there's nowhere for me to go except for down. I'll just go to the lower realms. But it will be nobody's doing other than our own. So again, what Geshe is really stressing here is that it's in our own hands what we do with our lives, what we do with our precious opportunity where we have a human rebirth. If we use our time well, then we will engage in virtue. We will engage in listening, studying, contemplating, and meditating. We will rely on qualified, good spiritual teachers and follow their advice and put the teachings into practice.
지금 가보님도 전에 내가 대화도 전도 가버렸지 대화 뭐냐 말했으니.
So all of these like worldly delights, like particularly like romantic endeavors, with boyfriends and girlfriends, are maybe temporarily they seem like happiness, but they actually are not ultimately of any real benefit. They are not the ultimate happiness.
대도선자 나저도 뭐 이제 가려서나 코와 갑지 세모는 대화나면 여만이 송거디 대말도 왔으니.
And so as the Buddha has said, there is not even as much true happiness as can be found on the tip of a pin or on the tip of a needle in samsara. There's not even like a tip of a needle's worth of happiness to be found. And this is really true. It is because there is the temporary seeming happiness that we chase after, lifetime after lifetime. And this is what continues, or this is what keeps, the wheel of samsara, perpetuating. It perpetuates our experience in samsara. It's because of this, like chasing after happiness, and then it just keeps on going.
그래. 근데 sonza 내가 비 대화문에 요이면은 고 유래매가 차고 그랬으니. 대화문에 바니바이나 유래매가 차고 그랬으니.
Temporary happiness is not true happiness, because true happiness is not, it doesn't change. It's unchanging.
근데 sonza 인당 가르레스나 빼나 부지 부모지 가부지 체대에 딱 고추도 찍니 니만 나와지 딱 소소히 파도 자와 되게 됐으니라. 안 디젤라 야 찍찍 레마소 니니 레마소 파도 찍 셈바나로 소소소도 간이 첨부 소도 왔으니. 때 동안 나가 줄수 왔으니. 때 규르에 동안에도 왔으니.
So this is really evident in romantic relationships, because when you have the two people who are in love with each other, and then they are really in love and they give each other happiness maybe for like a month or a few months, temporarily everything is fine, but then so often something happens and then everything changes, and suddenly the person who was a cause of happiness becomes a cause of great suffering. So instead of a situation that was one of love and happiness, it becomes one of fighting and suffering, or just of discontent. And so in that way, because it changes, then it's subject to the suffering of change. It isn't true happiness.
진짜선자 아니 잠볼인데라 부인하래 부모인하래 망쳐왔다 부모 일익디 다 부모 일익 찍고 소야를 말해 보다이나 부모이나 소소이다 소소이 까니기 동련 까니의 세모도 보니 아니 소소 독통해야다 아 소소소 랑시 개야다 아 소소 차라 좀 아니 직 야마 모다나가 좀니 시에다 딜려고 딜려고 그랬어요
Tena rangshi
랑시 개미 되는다 아 소모도 되나 가부가모 탑 아니 가부디 딱딱 말해 아니 대원지 소소 semba 마데발레 아니 소소소 랑시 개미 딜려고 왔어요
So there are many examples of, because this romantic love is so promising, or seems so promising, there are many in the world, both men and women, or boys and girls, who, because of the betrayal of a lover or something, because of a relationship that went sour, then they became so miserable, so devastated that they actually became like mentally unstable, and then they actually harmed themselves, like they drank poison, or they threw themselves off of a cliff, or they somehow committed suicide because of this relationship gone wrong. So yeah.
텐데송사 다 텐두 조벨 텐두 대화디 가르쳤습니다. 다 조베 산지지 고반디 텐두 대화 규례 내봐 오늘 대화 문내봐 뭐마디 조베 산지지 고반디 레샤스네 다 조베 산지지 고반 두고 봐 인사 땅어송원에 다 창조스미 냠렌데라 제 냠레라 베서르치 다 데네 데나시 연구도 민동가서다 퇴성고서 체내 데라다 다 연구도 민도 다 탑시체 개심무시고 레샤스네
So in that case, it is much wiser to invest ourselves towards the accomplishment of ultimate happiness, true, stable, lasting happiness, which is the only real happiness to be found, which is the happiness of enlightenment or complete Buddhahood. And so the way in which we can reach that is through effort and practice, through engaging in the practice of listening, contemplating, and meditating.
티데송자 둥엘데다 둥엘 요인지 가서다 코아나라 코르바라와 코아나라 코르에디 가서다 이게 티거토네 좋아요 말에 베자티네 좋아요 말로와 다 둥엘 요인지 코아나라 코르바 인사 안에 산지 좀 낸데기 아니 유로와라나스가 당보다 최지콜로 당보 코르디 덴바시 송바라와 덴바시는 당보 데네 동안 판베 덴바오 니바 데네 꾸주 판베 덴바오 데네 고바 판베 덴바오 데네 람파베 덴바오 데이 나니게다 당보 동안 송해야 된다 디인사를 했어요.
And so, as long as we do not reach this ultimate unchanging happiness of enlightenment, then we will just continue to circle within samsara, to experience the endless suffering of samsara life after life. So in that way, the wheel of samsara continues to turn as long until we experience liberation, or until we reach liberation. And so the basis for this endless suffering is embodied in the Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths. When the Buddha turned the first turning of the wheel at Varanasi, then he taught the Four Noble Truths, which was the truth of suffering, the truth of the origination of suffering, the truth of cessation, and the truth of the path.
데이터 동알시 덴바시게 나는 동알 덴바시 다 대나네다 마소 마소 루이디 미탁과 임바 계직이라 유료의 인사에서 나줬던 말이다 소소 루부디 미탁과 임바 하고죠 거에 된다라 당보 코란다 따와가다기 차게시 여러와 따와가다기 차게시 나네 당보 코란 뒤제 탐제 미탁 숨시라스 뒤제 탐제 미탁과 사제 탐제 동알로 최 탐제 동시 담에와
뒤제 탐제
미탁과 다 미탁과디 가서 미탁과디 개치 모시고 차제여와 루이디 끼지끼지를 교조와 루이디 데링 데빌 산이 데마스 딩마르와 산이 데빌 나니가 되게 말해 대인사 루이디라 남치 님에 가두시다 가두시 맛이 땡땡 매바 인사 다 루이디 미탁과인 바 하고에 된다라 당보코랑 다저된 바지 아니 따와가다기 차제시 남바 진이 되나 미탁과 삼고래다 쓰နေတာ팀수에도 왔습니다.
알레 라소.
따와가다기 차제시 힘들어와.
네. 타와카다기 차자시.
뒤제 탐지 미탁과. 사제 탐지 동알와. 최 탐지 동시 담매와. 동식 다음에 봐. 아니 냥년이 되게 쉬워 숨으셔야 돼. 담보코랑 뒤제 탐지 미다고 숨도 왔으니. 대인자 수술 리디 미다고 이봐 하고 했던다라 인사를 했으니.
So, as our bodies are subject to the nature of impermanence, there is the subtle impermanence of all phenomena, which is, manifesting moment by moment, instant by instant. So nothing is ever the same. Like our body today is not the same body tomorrow, because it is constantly undergoing this process of change and flux. This is the nature of impermanence, of subtle impermanence. And so to exemplify the truth, or to really hone in on kind of the essence of the truth of permanence, then there are the 4 seals of the Kadampa view. So of the Kadampa. Seal. Oh yeah, so it's just the view of the 4 seals. So which is that all compounded things, all composite things are impermanent. That's the first seal. The second seal is that which is defiled, zakche, tamche, dumawa. So zakche, as many of you study Tibetan, I know, is a really interesting word to translate into English, because it's usually translated as defiled, but some people I think say translate it as outflows, but it's not perfectly translatable anyway. It's just also kind of like all compounded things, but it also means all things that are sort of tainted or subject to the afflictive emotions. So you could say defiled. All defiled things are the nature of suffering. That's the second seal.
Yeah.
And then the third seal is all phenomena is selfless, and the nature of emptiness. It's empty and selfless, and then or lacking an inherent self. And then the fourth seal is enlightenment, or nirvana, is peace, is ultimate peace.
근데 소상 따와까지 이제 자기 수행에 남바 상계바 진도요나 팀디 키고를 송발을 했습니다. 남바 상계바 제기 되바 여바이나 팀 단다디 나셔던 바에 송샤기 팀지요로와 따와까지 자기 시디 켈레모레 송발.
So this is really like it's like the law of Buddhism in a sense. All of those who are Buddhists must kind of accept these 4 seals, these views, because these are essential to the Buddhist view for the practice of Buddhism. That's all.
근데 송당 가서다 당보코로 뒤제 탐제 미탁바레 송발라테네 루이마 미탁바 두바레 루이 미탁바 두발라테네 루이디 기지기지를 기와테 바 두바라와 근데 소나 최 두베 되나 감도코도 두고레 마도 대리 맞춰봐서 산이 지기 나니가 지기 쓰는 가서 차시 띵나 자원이냐 보여서 말했습니다. 갑도코도 두베디 디 개점 보시고 인사했습니다.
So regarding this first seal of the 4 seals, that all compounded phenomena, or all composite phenomena, is subject to impermanence, or is impermanent. So our body is impermanent. Our body is manifesting impermanent moment by moment, instant by instant. So we can't put anything off, because it's really uncertain, what things will be tomorrow, when we will die. And so rather than putting off our Dharma practice, we should engage in practice immediately. We should do so right now.
어디인사를 근데 손자다 담비쇼 주벨랑서 뒤져서 아니 세장을까 세번 딸이들 지긴 딸이니라 지긴에서는 세장 막아봐시 갑두다 냠네 제디 캐시 모르시았으니 나왔다 디수 못해지 이제 당가서 다 나바들 두긴으로 나바들 돈이 봉화스니 디비 토보 돈이 뭐 봉한데 디비 토보 봉인데 강다 주나 도선 펠게시 퇴상법에 자원님 줄라 송으로와 잠단이 이제 매번 교습에 돈이 봉화 자세 라리니 강다 주나 소나 소소기다 디비 토보 송에 됐다 다저도 뭐에 손여리 딕비 초고 따도 방자지 개위 초고 달라 땜바샤 송바라와 딕비 초고 따도 만 딕비 초고 또도 빵고래 저와 지요 말했어 개위 초고 추로도도 저와 지요었어 라와 딕비 초고 냠도 저와 임바이나 소소이다 지 타바 제도고 말에 삼바 제도고 말에 고마 제도는 가에서는 코 내가 누가 쟁여 지기로 와 대인상 퇴선곰비 저와 냠도 그랬어 되네 다 퇴선곰비 저와 냠나 아니 파주들 세단기기래 되샤기기래 콘도기기로 와다 세단기바이나 잠바 냠사래 콘도기바이나 아니 닌제 냠사로 와 잠다 매버 잠다 닌제 매버 규체비 전혀 보면 자세나 된다면서 된다고 딕비 초보 미네레 영어 도송 라서바디 다 인지미지 빵거래 했으니까 생각만 단다 쇼로가 나바디게 전혀 보면 도바래 전혀 봐 딕비 초보 보면 당연히 전다 대신 돌도도 얘기했는데 간사는 대림배저 차에 가보래서 이나 대림에 강도치도 딜라기 아니다 쇼마직 겨 가서 겨와서 주마다 로주마 연에서서 연주치 다 마시바 임바이나 다 차시라 된다 칼로다 지 칼로다 템제신에 다 로주마 직 제기 다 데 템제 인사에서 대림배저 사사 말했어 데르 스모로 치라
So, first of all, Geshe says, he's going to try to be more brief in his explanations, but even still, he thinks finishing the text is it's not likely that we'll finish today. So maybe he said it's a good sign that when he comes back next time, he'll be able to finish. So he'll come back and so it's probably a tindral, which is a sign of auspicious interdependence. So he's still going to just keep going with kind of more abbreviated explanations. But so now we're at verse number 5, and the instruction for verse number 5 is the instruction to abandon negative friends. So it says, if you befriend this one, these 3 poisons will proliferate. The deeds of listening, contemplating, and meditating will diminish, and loving kindness and compassion will become extinct. To abandon negative friends is the practice of the Bodhisattva. And the instruction is to abandon negative friends, or those who are bad influences, those who will pull one into negative mind states and negative, into engaging in negative deeds, and instead to befriend virtuous spiritual friends, to be around those who are good examples, who will influence one in positive ways, to engage in virtue. So if we hang around with negative companions, then the activities of listening and contemplating will become less. We won't engage in listening and contemplating as much. Instead, we will maybe engage in bad habits, and so therefore will be more subject to giving rise to negative emotions, such as anger and desire. And if we have anger in our mind stream, then we don't have loving kindness, we don't have love. And if we have desire in our mind stream, then we don't have compassion. So if our negative emotions increase, then the virtuous emotions such as loving kindness and compassion will diminish. And so therefore the instruction is to abandon those negative friends who are harmful influences, who cause one's virtuous qualities to decrease.
근데 손자 단단 가서다 잠단이 이제 도숨 예문 도숨 때나로 도숨 때나 잠단이 이제 잠바단이 이제 냠고 가르랬으나 아주 잠바단이 이제 개발돼 하고 그랬으면로 도스타디 잠바단이 이제 뭐도 된다도 직발적으로 이나야 개발이 됐으면 그냥
So if we indulge in the 3 poisons, then the positive emotions of loving kindness and compassion will diminish. So it seems like love and compassion are the same. They may seem very similar, and they are of the same essence ultimately. But there are also differences. There are subtle differences.
근데서 다다 잠발라이데 간들서나 loving kindness ro love chamba la di dewa da chunde phaji semjen dingi dewa de tena chimaru la chamba resin kenso ma phaji de semjen dingi dewa de tena disa resin somebody chamba resin phaji de semje di o dungan de tena disa la somebody ningje resin ene ko zintang khaga chagu do asin tensa shedan ke di phaji midela shedan ke kabla 아니 퍼주드 대화 쳐봐서 로디 리기 말했어요. 퍼주드로 콘도 사베 갑라 오코 동안들 채널 선별로디 리기미 도왔습니다. 대인상 예모 도숨 끼는데 잠바당이 이제 찾아 봐. 네가 슝슝 도 도왔습니다. 여나 네가 슝슝 도 매나니 네가 슝 도에 임바 도왔습니다.
네, 공다 나한테서 인상 때나 두차 민제 메바조야기 좀 생각이나? 두차
맞아. 콘도 shedan lana pachudita yidu myowa kaza yidu myowa thombarwa yidu myowa tenza shedan kyudi dewa koewa samlo ligi marwa chambagi ngogo karesena pachud semjinde dewa la koewa ji kuji samlo rawa ningje la yedi dungal meba soyegi samlo rawa kondo sadeba ina ningje ligi marwa shedan kye deba ina kolaba semna la 나자 심디고 말고 코 대화 토바시들 semle ligi marwa 왔어요.
이네강 shedan dang control
개발이래. shedan la yedi ngazota dirowa 콘도 la yedi ngazo yidu myowa la yidu watwa. 가서 yidu mechuela yidu myowa.
알레.
라와. 소소 파말라 쩨와 가도요 봐 임바이나 쩨와요 이네 삼장나 지금 마디바나 아마 람서 콘도 사기도. 그래서 쩨와요 이네고 yidu watwa yidu myowa.
맞아.
다니에 파르숨나와 참발라예디 대화의 텐드 shedan 또 록슈디로 텐사 참바등이 이제 처벌도 왔어요.
Okay. So the difference between love and compassion, Jamba, which is love, is the thought that thinks, oh, if sentient beings could be happy, how wonderful it would be. Like, what can I do to make others happy? So it is essentially the wish to see others have happiness. And compassion is essentially the thought that says, if only I could somehow free beings from suffering, if beings could be free from suffering, how wonderful it would be. And so it's essentially the mind that wishes for beings to be free from suffering. So love is the wish for beings to have happiness, and compassion is the wish for beings to be free from suffering. And when we have anger in our mind stream, then everything is painted by that anger. Our perception is painted by that anger. And love is like the direct opposite of anger. So if the mind is permeated by anger, then there's no way that one can have love in their mind at the time of that anger. If one sees negatively, then one isn't going to think, I wish this person could have happiness, because one's mind is just in this negativity. And then also if one has, so this is the difficulty, because actually, Geshe used two words which I usually translate both as anger. One is shedang, which is anger, but it actually is maybe more hatred, is maybe a better translation of it. And then the other word is kontro, which is maybe more like, maybe it's similar to irritation, but stronger than irritation. And so he said the difference between shedang and kontro is that shedang is when you see things that are actually pleasant and beautiful to behold as unpleasant and ugly. So when you have that perception in your mind, then you don't want, you're not going to think, oh, if only beings could have happiness. And then this word kontro is like, even though you may love someone, but you become really mad at them, you know, like your mother, for instance, you love your mother, but then maybe you get angry at her, you're fighting, and so you're temporarily overwhelmed with this emotion of kontro. And in that case, it's impossible to have compassion. So when one has this kontro in their mind stream, then compassion is like the opposite of that. So those negative emotions destroy love and compassion.
샤당다 참바니보디고 갈와를 샤스니 가와 있나 카레레스나 조이나라 모바 조이나라와 아비다르마 카레
Abhidharma kosha.
아비다르마 코샤 로비잉이라 카레라 그래
나?
로비잉이
Oh, Vasubandhu?
바스반도 바스반야야 바스반도 카르나 셰당 매참 닝제 양송으로 셰당 매참 닝제 양송에디 셰당 매발라에디 참바이 모월에서는 숨도 왔으니 셰당다 참바이보디 가와 인단디 카르스나 셰당 참바이디 가와 있나 셰당 매바디 참바를 했으니 숨도 왔으니 아비달마나 셰당 매참 닝제 양송샤스니 콩투사디 했으니
So, anger or hatred and love are contradictory. They they are the opposite of one another. And so in the Abhidharma Kosha, Vasubandhu says the absence of anger and love are the same. So love is the absence of anger. So when we have the absence of anger, then we have love.
어떤데 인자 샤당 레디 아니 참바냠 와 샤당 슈춤벌레디 참바디냠 콘로 시춤들레도 다 닌지디 냠도도 왔어 근데 인자 독숨라소벌레디 아니 참바다 닌제라소버디바 냠도도 근데 인자 다 녀모 독숨라소버디 뽕오레스 숨바레스
So in that case then, every time that we give rise to very strong anger or hatred, then we are really harming the love in our mind stream. We're causing our qualities of love to diminish. And so, in order, if we want to increase our positive qualities, such as love and compassion, which is the objective, on the path to enlightenment, then we need to abandon the three poisons. We need to strive vigilantly to let go of negative emotions, afflicting emotions.
되는데 다음으로 초바디 가르선다 조ኝ마 방고에나 다 조칸데 된 거래서나 조 상보디 된 거, 조보야 못된 거래 송발에 했으니 초바디.
So then the sixth verse is essentially saying, having abandoned negative companions or negative friends, we should seek the company of spiritual friends or virtuous friends.
근데 sonza 조 상보 칸데 된 거래서나 kanshitena nyeba seju shingzalata 다 독숨라서가 nyeba de se 된달라 다 뒤에 nyembo 땡고 레스네로 nyembo 땡바이나 아니 독숨라서 never so to 레스네로 아니 디 땡바이나 연대 양면 다들 펼기를 배송으로 소소지 연대 다 소소 예중게 삼바이나 cam로 이나에 장주에 쓴다 니제다 참발라서 가져이나 되니 세바 찍네 연대 양면 다들 펼기를 배송인데 세바 값도 나와지 시작으로 와 아니 세바니라 딜티 쳐 되네 세바 숨라 쳐와죠 세바 정할래디 풀몬 자유도 와서 되나시 되나시다 연대 칼레 야 두고랬으니 연대 양은 다들 펼쳐지 아니 신의 탐바란이 르베장 대인자 연대 야 펼베다 소소 라마 기비신이 수수도 땡고랬으니 알아와 라마 기비신이 수수도 땡 아니 제발 징고랬으니 라니 치즈탄 제발 지서 소소소도라다 그래서 제발 제발 자세나 소소 라마 기비신이라 자침보지 로 자침보지 때때라 괴셔다 딜레쳐바이나 아니 소소 연대 도도 야 공배도 줘 아니 다텔라 녀모 따다 된투 그랬으니
맞아.
데디 하고서
So it says, if you rely on this one, your faults will become exhausted and your qualities will expand like the waxing moon. To cherish a genuine spiritual friend, even more dear than one's own body, is the practice of a bodhisattva. When we abandon negative companions and instead seek the company of those beings who are spiritually exalted, really genuine, virtuous friends, spiritual teachers, then especially those who are superior to us, like our spiritual teachers and so forth, they're spending time, in their virtuous presence will cause our own qualities to expand and increase. So it gives this example of the waxing moon. So on the first day of the lunar month is the new moon. There is right
Yeah.
new moon, and then the second day, the third day, it becomes like a little sliver, and then more and more and more up until the 15th, where it's like this full moon. So this waxing of the moon is like the example that's given for kind of the process that occurs when one surrounds oneself with exalted spiritual beings. Naturally, one's own positive spiritual qualities start to develop and increase, just like the waxing moon. So to keep the company of teachers, and spiritual friends, to hold them, to cherish them, and hold them dear, to really regard them as really precious, to serve them, and attend to them, is the antidote, for dini nimbo, kandu nimbo re.
La.
Nimbo kandu re? Nimbo?
Nimbo tengo re sini.
Yeah.
Nimbo toso na nimbo tengo.
So it's the antidote to one of the antidotes to the afflictive emotions.
Nimbo tengo kandu re sena pacho di tapena maji gyaguye ba ina mangmi to chana dena la ta tholo dame lo kungu do asini. Kocha sungura kocha mangmi do de pacho ne diu masoyo tundala. Di cheba ina diu di nanglo sugu maro. Oti sa nimbo tina ji tengo re sini.
So
갑도 거도 갑대 채워 그랬으니 콜리기도 쓰는 수도 쿰데나 코 망ar만 두고 콜라 갑도 nem 그랬어.
Okay. So we have many antidotes, that we need to like apply or adhere to on the path, and the antidotes are like, they're all the antidotes to the afflictive emotions, the mind of afflictive emotions, and they're like armor, like the armor of a soldier in battle. Like a soldier in battle who wears a protective armor, if he's struck by another sword, then it won't be able to penetrate, it won't be able to harm him. So in the same way, when we like shield ourselves with antidotes, with the proper antidotes, then the afflictive emotions will have no chance to like harm us or to be victorious over us. And so it's important to apply all of the various antidotes at all times.
Today in Santa, Nyabutina did the rest. That Dumadi Karesumosana, Camro Shivo, yes, in Elwa, Camro Shana Karesena, Ryan Kurusura, Chimbai, Chitella, Sushi Cabernet, Teacher Kanla, Camna Milu, Kunju Camus, Lalini, say. When a Ryan, Tai Capsu Dosaji, you'll tell her, Sosole Cho to Yuba, Sanje Kunju, Chokuju, Gindu Kuju Sumla Capsu Dogo de Mato, Teleshimbi, Jikin Tikbila, Lula Sovala, the Capsu Droba Yimbaina, and also Koale Tartuku Mares in this one.
So then the next verse is addressing refuge, the mind of refuge. So it says, themselves also bound in the prison of samsara, whom do the worldly gods have the power to protect. Therefore, when seeking a refuge, to go for refuge in the three jewels that will not deceive you is the practice of a bodhisattva. So when we seek refuge, like as Buddhists, then we take refuge in the three jewels. And there's no refuge, no source of refuge that is superior to the supreme refuge of the three jewels. So therefore, having taken refuge in the unsurpassed three jewels, then to rely on like worldly deities or worldly entities who are also bound or subject to negative emotions themselves or have not achieved liberation, then it defeats the purpose. They don't have the power to protect one.
So like Gyapsagi Yultela, Tasanje Kunju, Chugunju, Gindu Gunju, the Pasha, Ani Jitin Bilhal, Tosola Gyapjobayana, and a Pema to our Resini. Candidates Koran, Koana like Camde Resini. Koana like Camdehi, Midihi, Ladigi, Koagi, Midoya, Dentukumar was in. Pena Caresena, Michigrawa, Gazochumbona, Dimderoa, Dimdere, Kot Tundala Mikoran Shanda, Gazon, Dimdegi, Miki. Gazona dimdigi midi ya tentu marwasin rawa bedi reseni.
So if you like, if one cannot rely, on, or one doesn't seek the protection of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but then thinks that there's some other source of refuge out there which is somehow better or will better protect one. This is a completely erroneous thinking, because if worldly gods who themselves are also within samsara, they cannot. How can they protect others, or how can they be a source of refuge if they themselves are also bound by suffering? It's like if somebody is drowning in an ocean and another person is drowning in the ocean, and that one person latches on to the other drowning person, hoping that they're going to pull them out of the ocean and help them, protect them and bring them to dry land. Well, that just obviously wouldn't work. They're both gonna just pull one another down. So if somebody is drowning in the ocean, then they have to rely on somebody who is not in the ocean, somebody on dry land, on the shore, to actually, bring them up and bring them to the dry land. So wait, garela konta
소소라 코위다 년소숨지 동안으로와 년소숨지 동안에 겹니데 수레스나 산지군주 추군주 겐디군주 숨부지여러 와서 코란 갸졸레 파타사라 와서 다르게 미기야 템바이나 텐투으로 와서니라 다 텐데 손자 산지군주 추군주 겐디군주 짭투고르마도 코란나라 코르디니 갸존나라 유니 미디기 갸존나지 미야 텐투고 말했으니 다 탱게 미 소소레스나 산지군주 추군주 겐디군주 텐데 손자 두이균들에 맞섰다 군주숨라 잡수드네 겸도 남다체 개치무시고 했으니
in order to be freed from the suffering of the three lower realms and the suffering of samsara, it is by relying on the ultimate refuge, the unsurpassed refuge of the precious Dharma, the precious Buddha, the precious Dharma, and the precious Sangha. Because the three jewels are beyond the suffering of samsara, they are beyond the ocean of samsara, then they can actually provide actual protection and support. They are an appropriate object of refuge. If we wish to be freed from this ocean of suffering, this ocean of cyclic existence, then we can rely with full confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as our refuge. So the completely pure refuge of the three jewels is very important.
다 코알레 타르벨라 오 산지군주 캡수체 추군주 캡수체 긴두군주 캡수체 라바zam게 코알레 타르투고 말했으니라 코알레 타리기 탑디 산지 줍는디기 땡샤요 그랬으니라 람가 템데르다 추군주 멘디 나소기 사마서 소소라 발레 그랬으니라 코알레 타베기 타르비 람주로 람디 추군주 디랬으니라 추군주라 냠레 마체나 코알레 타르투고 말이야 페르나 미지 네바지 이게 맹하나라치 doctor ki ta taje sigiro wa doctor ki taje chere mo doctor ki nebadi naza dele twetu maro ta doctor ki kera naza dire sha chogo nago na chogo nago do kera chogo men tigiro wa chogo ni men tene men di sawa yana ni ko chogo na naza le targire o kera chogo na sha men di mate bache men di tene masaba imbaina ani chogo na naza le tartu고 말어. 대나시 산지 군주기 람가 뛰셔야 람가 뛰면 이제 소소 랑가딜라 다 맨디 사다 마사 소소 람발로 도와세. 대세네 산지 군주 캡트마고 최군주 캡붕에 겐디 군주 캡두비 다톡 수에다 최군주디 맨 소보디레샤스네로 맨 나자델
담보 산지 그래?
산지 군주 캡트마고 캡 조베 산지 고만 두비 탑된케 땡긴 최근주디 men 다 코알레 다리 men 속어디 최근주들이 샤세 men디 마사나 아니 나자디 작은 말와 doctor 수 산제군주체 아니 최근주디 men레 샤세
Dini gende?
겐디 군주 캡주비 다조 땅에서 로빠칭이 초조
Ne yokdawo.
말에 초조 초조죠
Dini mingi pe la chik yorebe?
La.
Gende na mingi pe nong la chik yorebe?
요 말이요.
Okay, so, if we say in order to achieve liberation from samsara, if we say merely with our mouths, if we just give like lip service by saying I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, that alone is not enough. We actually have to engage in the practice of the path. We have to enter into the path and traverse the path. And the path, the Dharma, the jewel of the Dharma is the path, and it is like medicine. So if a doctor gives you medicine, if you have like some stomach problem, and the doctor gives you medicine, and then if you eat that medicine, then you will heal your stomach problem. But if the doctor gives you medicine and then you don't eat it, then there is no way that you can actually recover from your stomach problem. You have to actually ingest the medicine. So in the same way, to actually, in order for the three jewels to actually provide refuge to us, to actually function as our refuge or protector, we have to engage in the practice of the path. We have to eat the medicine. And so if the example is that the Buddha is the one who indicates the path. So the Buddha is like the doctor. And then the Dharma is the method, it is the path itself, so it is like the medicine. So in order for the three jewels to actually function as our refuge, to actually bring us out of samsara, we have to engage in the practice of the path. The most kind of powerful of these three jewels in this case is the Dharma.
제게 개청고 시골에 셨습니다. 겸로디 하모고나 산지군절에 이체니기 말에 산지군절에 이체면나 되니 추라 냠래치기 말에 아니 추라 냠래 마치나 되니 마서 다 산지기 조비 산지 고만 톱라야 되다 카zamre 마도 된달라 톱에 가보시고 했습니다.
So refuge is so important, and having really genuine faith in the three jewels is so important to our practice, because if we have faith and devotion towards the Buddha, then we will trust the path. We will trust his teachings. So with faith and trust, then we'll be motivated to actually engage in the practice of the path. And then by practicing the path or the Dharma, then we reach the fruition of liberation and enlightenment. But if we don't have faith in the Buddha and then put his teachings into practice, then there's no method for liberation and enlightenment.
Today in Zanta, in Jimmy Camdo did Nambi Jugu, Yisuya Tenda, Sobodi inside, Namba Imbats in the Madibache. Nambachi la kare chugore sena camdo di gure sene camdo di tas nambi jugo sumbar warna camdo khabar chendita camdo di namba sanji bi jugo sunye dita namba ina camdo di gyula kewore sene ta khamba nalo zuela taji ngaso trijues nalo zuela godi meba ina maso trijues na le thugu mara tennashi camdo mena namba sangyo nalo suguyo samare tenza camdo kechumore do asene.
So in order to be enter the door of Buddhism, to become a Buddhist, one has to take refuge. Refuge is the door, of the Buddhist practice. And if one doesn't enter into the door, then there isn't any like real basis for the practice. So this is so, the mind of refuge, in addition to having taken the vows of refuge, the mind of refuge is extremely important. It can't be underestimated. It is really profound, and it's a huge part of the whole practice, because it's the very basis. So if we really give rise to a sincere mind of refuge in our mind stream, then that becomes a solid foundation, because it's the door. It's like we have this building that is the Three Jewels Center, and then there's the door, and then you walk through the door, and that enables you to like enter into the center. But if you don't have a door, then there's no way to get in. So the refuge is really like the door to entering into the path that leads to enlightenment.
이제 셔서 이제 겸도치에 개심보시고 그래도 왔으니 다 들려서나 이제 대린 사회라 가보체서를 그나 망쳐 왔다 구제고 있잖냐체 안 대린 다가 샤고 메조스니로 대린 답에서 대린 다 샤고 메조스니로 그나 사회 가보치기도 아니 지금 유령 못하네 지금 녀도 차이 모르겠으니 아니 마이클 데드 송샤는 말에
So I guess she says it looks like we're not going to be able to get anywhere near to finish with the text. And so should he wrap things up now, because he's worried that if we go over, we spend too much time, it might get irritating or boring.
딩엘랑 나서도 마이클은 얘기했으니까 딩에만 사변바다 단다 사변바라 이만이 곱샤 갸베레 이나야다 맞아 사인 녀마딩 가서 계기로 말아봐서 되지 제마 도바래 이나야 따디 따끼야 못했는다 연주 로중만 연주다 연기 때문에 찍고 있어야지 수도 되게 챙겨도 쓰니
So even though Geshe said, there have been a few Saturdays where he was able to teach a little bit, but there was the challenge of not having an interpreter. So now this is like the last time that he's able to give teachings before he leaves, but he thinks that it's the conditions have now come together, so it's again an auspicious symbol a symbol of auspicious interdependence. So it's a good tendril, and he hopes that when he comes again, he'll be able to continue with these teachings and bring them all the way to the end.
다 템데 인다 가르스는 그냥 나랑기 템데 써봐 되게 매스네 라마 첨부도 소이나 송주 이나에 다 추기 제시 잡아 임바 이나에 타마타마디 양나 띠또 샤야다 그냥 사선이야 고니야 또 제기 되게 룩소도 쓰는데 템데 소이 있어요. 템데 라마 첨부도 소이 송주 제비 갑라 송주 이나에 다 추기 제시 잡아 갑라 이나 차단 차니 연주 고니 띠스 등구도 쓰니 고니 디치 간사나 고츠바디 연주 제마 이게 템데기 소인 살아서 템데 나랑 설명해라 라마도 딘데 지기도 쓰니
So he said that his thought that this is an auspicious sign is not just his own thinking. He didn't make it up, but actually, the high lamas, when they give a teaching, they'll give a teaching, all the way from start to finish, and then they'll go back and they'll teach a little bit beginning again, from the start, as a symbol of auspicious interdependence, to teach it again in the future, to pick up where he left off.
뒤즈디 땅에서 칼로르다 창한디 샤이기 된달라 말은 오늘 저는 대린 사야기 삼로 땅바래 있나다 사야를 다가서 로데고 있나니 아니 캐랑줄을 편들내봐 나라나에 지금 다 체도고 차도고도 쓰니 안 제시 겸나 아니 뒤즈기로 뭐 차도고도 네 캐랑도 꾸니고 연구를 했으니 라버도 나라 제시 겸 삼복 마임바 네 저거 랍니라 마도 캐랑조랑 기타 인지토네 뭐지 티샤요래 그래서 오늘 소소소소 나라 뒤균도네 달로 내가 이 된다도 삼로다 냠리 용구도 민규도 강도치도 제 개심보시고 그러셔서 대낭으로 제 있습니다.
So Geshe said, it was his intention to go through the whole text, but realistically, he, once you start explaining, it takes a little bit of time, to teach on the different verses. So, had he just read through the text, he doesn't think that would be very beneficial, But so in any case, if the most important thing is to inspire some inner reflection, and if you, now that you have this text that's translated in English, and so Geshe asks that you take it home with you and you read it, again and again on your own, and really do your best to try to put these instructions into practice. That's most important.
소소 지부 대백깔라 샘디 카와 두고 들어와 소소 지부 대백깔라 샘디 카와 두고도 야갈라 두고도 누가라 두고도 제발체 델라타 람상 이따 누가 데 삼로 거르고드나 다 누가 델라타 까이기 튼다 가이르도 니네 삼로 땅 바이바이나 아니 편도치 뭐야 살했으니까 근데 소간다 되긴드는 델라 냠렌지 쳐바이나 뭐다 랍천 보시고 계속 무조 통매 상보용 깔레기네 작품 넘버 되면 가요라이 마솔라다 칼라나 마도나 사주주 소샤에로 왔습니다. 칼라마도 소샤에서 시작이들라 아주 사월에서 다가서 유나 촐라단 게 말했습니다.
So also in addition to that, Geshe asks that you all pay attention, when you're kind of quiet and you're maybe, in your own space and you don't have much distraction, just pay attention to your mind, like what your mind is doing, where it's going, where it's sort of being drawn to focus. Is it going towards positivity or negativity? Is it going towards virtue or non-virtue? And if it's going, if it has a tendency, to go towards negativity, then what can you do to kind of correct that process, to interrupt that process, to make your mind change course from negative to positive? And if you can do, that, then it's really incredibly beneficial. It's so powerfully beneficial. So if you do that, and then also continue to read and reflect on these instructions, and try to live, by these 37 practices or instructions as they are taught by Nuchu Tongme, then it will be of great benefit to you.
근데 선사니 참만이다 로조망서다 토요지 고갑다 멜람제유 차란서 멜람보다 받다지야 딘데시는 툭 아니 engyo다 초유되는 가서 야마직 제시 야마 돌린지 취해라 마라 멜람제유 차란서 멜람제로 치러 뒤긴드는다 초랑냠는 나도 치는 마라 멜람제유였습니다.
So Geshe says he will continue to pray for you all. He will pray that you will progress along the path of Dharma, that you will do well, continue to practice according to Dharma, and also he will pray that you will be able to meet again. It's his hope and aspiration that he can come back, and that you will have time in the future to talk about the Dharma, to share the Dharma, to discuss it, and to be Dharma friends and companions. And so he will pray and make aspirations, and you too also pray and make aspirations.
다된데 손상아서 돈다. 가만 이슈디 아니 저한도 지워요나 미진이 지워요나 지워 당도 치세나. If you have 20 minutes, if you have any questions, 1-2 questions, then
10 minutes. Yeah. Anybody have a question? Stephen? In English, please.
Geshe mentioned that in the Dharma it says if someone commits suicide, then they'll the karma of that is to be reborn 500 first in the lower realms.
Yeah.
I'm curious what he thinks is the karma of the Tibetans who have self-immolated.
차네.
아.
뭐고 지네 되게 간대요래.
네, 어디. 나 다기네 람니 되어리나인데 뒤에 경거리스는 일라네 캐란 이 덴바레 간이스나 motivation rawa motivation kulong la rale 되어리스네 rawa kulong 인다 카레스나 벽어도 저기 소소 벽이 된다